and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, whenever you're listening to this.
Indeed.
This is the Martin Squared Podcast, episode 3, since episodes 1 and 2 were part A and B of our first conversation. My name is Matt Martin.
And I am Chris Martin.
And today on the podcast, we're going to go over a handful of things.
First of all, I want to point out that was a very NPR voice for you, which Matt doesn't ever talk that way, so not a bad radio voice. Not a bad radio voice at all.
Hello, and welcome to NPR. My name is Matt Martin.
Sweaty balls.
Chocolate.
Fantastic original skit there. And, okay, so let us begin, Matt, with the cigar we're going to be reviewing today, in addition to other topics that we'll be talking about, but take it away.
Well, this is a San Lotano Habano. It is a Toro size, which is roughly a 52 ring gauge by 6 inches in length.
I'm going to correct you on that. It's at 6 inches in length and 54 ring gauge.
54, okay.
And I just grabbed the wrapper that we just pulled them out of, so that's
well,
that.
You know, the Toro size in general is one of the...
when you think of a cigar, that's kind of the size you think of, unless you think of a Churchill.
And it's extremely...
It's a very standard size, would you say?
Yes, very consistent size as well. I mean, it does not vary. Maybe a 54, possibly 52 to 54 is usually the standard. 52 by 6 is the standard size. Sometimes you get a 54 by 6.
Okay.
But this is definitely one of my favorite cigars.
You mentioned earlier this is one of those, in your opinion, is a fantastic everyday cigar.
This is the upper tier of cigars for me in general.
Okay.
As far as I can smoke this, whether it's 6 o'clock in the morning or midnight, any day of the week.
This covers your need there, huh?
Absolutely. Okay. This is by far in my top 5 all-time cigars. That's that.
Are you referring to San Lotano in general, or the Habano itself, or just the... you're referring to this specific one, then.
Exactly. San Lotano by AJ Fernandez. I'm a big fan of AJ Fernandez, who's the creative mind behind San Lotano. I'm a big fan of all of his cigars.
Okay.
This San Lotano Habano, to me, is the quintessential cigar for anybody, whether it's a new cigar smoker, a person that's, like for me, I've been smoking cigars since the day I turned 18.
Right. I
turned 30 a few weeks ago.
Fantastic segue there now.
And so it's, before we get into getting old, which...
We're going to.
oh, God, we're definitely going to get into it. Let's light it up.
Indeed,
so,
sir.
Cheers.
Cheers. Imagine a clink as we tap cigars.
Clink.
Clink.
We both already cut the cap. I used a cutter that has a back to it.
And I use the same one.
What I like about the cutters with the backs is you get a consistent cut every single time. It's not, you don't have a little, you don't have variations like the regular.
I tell you what, I need to get a cutter with a back, because so often I'll end up cutting too much, and then I can really tell the difference. And a lot of times I'll cut just before the cap, and then I find that the drag is a little bit more labored, if that makes any sense. And that comes with my 5 years maybe of smoking cigars. I guess 5 or 6 at this point. And for those that haven't heard the last podcast, I'm assuming you probably haven't, that my brother was the one that really got me into cigars. And he's lighting up it right now. I just toasted the outside, which I'm a big fan of doing. You're the one that actually got me into that, just for the purpose of trying to keep a consistent burn, which I still suffer from time to time, but I'm a lot better at nowadays than I used to be.
What I like to do is I like to toast. I like to get a toast on the wrapper first, and then kind of go towards the center. But shame on me for not being fully prepared for this podcast. Both my lighters have just run out of fluid. So.
Well, like, it's live radio when we're recording it, or live audio when we're recording it, and so that happens from time to time.
But I do have a good burn. Everything seems to be lit properly, and once again, we are recording this from Jones Cowan Pipe and Tobacco Shop.
Always thank you to Danny Jones for allowing us the space and the time to do so. Danny is, we consider him one of our good friends. Of course, anyone that sells cigars, for the most part, it's easy to get into that kind of relationship. But Danny and I are both Aggies, so of course we have a good kinship there.
And me, I'm just a little old badger from Amarillo College. The address.
I'm not laughing at that. You Badgers are awesome, by the way. I know plenty of you.
The address to Jones Cowan Pipe and Tobacco Shop. Always feel free to stop by and visit Danny. He's a really down-to-earth type of guy.
And also, I might add, an unofficial sponsor of our podcast. But, of course, we'd like to give him some love on this as much as we can.
Absolutely. His address is 2744 Donovan Circle. Amarillo, Texas, 79109.
You didn't need to know the zip code, but that's okay. You know where it's at now.
In a way, the people that live in Amarillo, most of them know where the Home Depot just off of Georgia is.
Precisely, yeah.
It is just north of that Home Depot on Georgia.
If you walk out of Home Depot, you'll see the place.
Exactly.
Anyway, so initial impressions on the cigar. Of course, this is my first time with the San Lotano. And
what are your initial?
I guess we should start with that. Yeah. So heavy darkness on the front end here. Good flavor. It's there's a little bit of spice to it that I'm detecting, but not to make it unpleasant. I've never seen you do that with anything, much less food or a cigar. So that's an interesting reaction you got there. What do you think about
it? This cigar, I love it because it's medium bodied.
Okay.
It is straight medium bodied. There's not a whole lot of complexity to this cigar. I get a ton of earthiness and nuttiness.
Okay.
New cigar smokers, when they hear earthiness, they're not really that happy. They're like, so what are you like smoking? Does it taste like dirt or anything like that?
Okay.
The rich earthiness I get from this cigar is, and for me, it's always been difficult for me to describe what earthiness is, but it's a very easy flavor.
Not a lot of frills, so to speak. Now, see, when I think of earthiness, my immediate thought is green tea, which I'm a big fan of. But of course, when you're talking flavors, it's a completely different sort of situation here, and it's a little bit more of a broad topic, I think, when you're talking about food or drinks. But you're right. It's more of a, I don't know, pun it out and say down to earth, but really fairly simple, but fairly straightforward on your flavors. And in this cigar, I'm guessing you're not going to get a whole lot of those flavors changing from cut to burn here.
Right. And then the nuttiness. I right now, like I'm picking up like a very subtle peanut, a little bit of a cashew note.
Okay.
In the nuttiness.
Okay.
I mean, this is like I said, this is one of those I can light up any time of the day.
Sure.
If I had the money, I would always keep at least 20 of these cigars in my humidor.
I don't always smoke a San Lotano, but when I do, it's every day. With a B.
Exactly.
Sun comes up and rises high.
All right. So, like we were saying at the top of the show, the first topic is getting old.
Matt has turned 30 last month.
Yeah, June 25th.
About 3 weeks ago now. 3 weeks ago.
For those people that want to send me something, next year, my birthday's June 25th.
And how do you feel at 30?
Like, hitting the big 3-0, it's kind of amazing. with extremely brief,
Okay.
Backstory, and I don't know if I did this in the last podcast or not. I got hit with I got hit kind of with the with one of our genetic flaws. We have a really long family history of physical issues. I developed early on what they call degenerative joint disease, or DJD. And it's a genetic flaw that usually doesn't come up until the prognosis isn't until like you're 13, 14 years old. By the time I was 13, 14 years old, I was already working on knee surgery number 5.
Right.
21 years ago, I had my first knee surgery.
Right.
And have, outside of maybe 6 years, I've had knee surgery every single year.
And so
which culminated into, back in 2013, I had both my knees replaced.
And so really, one of the things that you said about yourself and about your knees is that you've had the knees of an 80-year-old for a long time. And so it would be fair to say that you have felt physically older for quite some time.
By the time I was 15 years old, this is a quote from my doctor, who I'm extremely good friends with. Mm-hmm. By the time I was 15 years old, I had the knees of an 80-year-old man.
Right. Now, talk a little bit about how you felt getting closer to 30. Like, what was that emotionally like for you? And then once you were past that point, how did that feeling change? Or did it?
It was one of those things where I will never forget this. About a year and a half ago, my wife and I were driving. We're headed home after, I think, visiting our mom. And she was saying, we were laughing, we were having fun, and then she was saying, how does it feel to be a year and a half away from 30? And my demeanor went from, to, and, the lead up to me being 30, I was just like, God, I can't believe I'm about to be 30.
Sure.
And, I look back on when I was 15, when I was 18. Like, to be totally honest with you, I didn't think I was going to make it this far. With everything going on in my mind, everything going on physically, sure. I honestly didn't think I would make 30. So, also with having real bad medical problems due to a couple of knee surgeries, that really, I was a lot closer than most 30-year-olds would be to not being around. So I've for the longest time I've taken kind of every day, one day at a time. I wake up being, okay, this is a new day. I'm awake.
It's a fantastic attitude to have.
And to be honest with you, I've never been happier.
Yeah, true.
Granted, I've had the mentality of somebody in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, since about 18. With the exception of when I worked in television, and going out most nights drinking, I felt like I was invincible. But those days are well behind me now. Like, the last time I had more than 2 drinks in a day was probably about 8 months ago, playing pool.
Right.
And just, I don't do that anymore. I rarely drink nowadays. My vice is cigars. Yeah. Granted, my work has a lot to do with that, having to be up before the crack of dawn.
And that's one thing that I've heard from a lot of people who, have kind of a shift in their work, and they get more of, somewhat more closely to a 9-to-5 schedule. You just don't have the energy to stay out late. And I think that has more to do with, whatever, work that you do, whatever you end up doing, and what makes that shift rather than, your age. And there's a lot to be said for, you know, do you consider yourself old in doing this, you know, in having that sort of a situation? And I don't think it's that. I think it's more of, you know, whatever your work is, where, you know, you just can't stay out late because you're going to regret it the next day. And that's, I would think, one sign of maturity is realizing, oh, well, if I do this and I have a really terrible day, that doesn't feel good at all. So let me, you know, cut back on this stuff. And sometimes you just do it without even realizing it. And, you know, and that's okay. If, you know, you have a work situation that allows you to continue going out drinking, that's something that you enjoy. Well, if that's something that's really, you know, high on your priority list, you'll continue to have whatever sort of employment that allows you to do that.
I wish I had a 9 to 5 schedule though. Like if I had a 9 to 5 work schedule, I'd actually be able to sleep in a little bit more. Because with it being summertime, I'm in bed before the sun goes down.
Yeah. Very true.
So, I mean, how does that make you feel? You being 3.5 years older than I am. How does that make you feel with me being 30?
Well, you know, I feel that that sort of elder brother mentality, maybe a little bit more. But I don't know. Our relationship hasn't really changed a whole lot, you know, in the last several years. And for me, 30 was, you know, it was another stepping off point. But, you know, I enjoy being in my 30s and doing things a little bit differently. But again, you know, a lot of that having to do with a changing job and things like that. So it's not much of a it's certainly not a negative thing. And I'll be honest, when I was a kid, I didn't have the mentality. I didn't have this big fear of 30 like a lot of people tend to have. You know, it was just, well, you know, I'm going to be older and hopefully wiser. Wisdom doesn't come with age. Wisdom comes with experience and just living life and dealing with the challenges that you have to deal with. So for me, it's not a whole lot different. But the funny thing is that now we all can say that you're old. And I say that not to disrespect anybody who is past 30 at all, and that's just simply because for years and years you called all of us old. So
that's very true.
That's really just getting you back and having a fun time at giving you a hard time.
And also with the brotherly thing of, you know, when I was born, Mom and Dad always tell this story of when I was born, you were quite saddened whenever you saw me because I was not green.
Yes, well,
you know.
Well, when I was a kid, I'm still favorite color is green, and yeah, back then I wanted everything green, including my little brother. But you know, holding you in my arms as you were an infant, I think changed that considerably. Mm-hmm. So,
all right, well, enough of this getting old BS talk. Oh God, sometimes I still can't believe I'm 30 years old. But then my brain passed 30 years old when I was 18. So so let's get on to some of the big topics that have happened over the last handful of weeks. As you guys know, I'm extremely into all things sports. I mean, since the last time we talked, we had the NBA Finals, which to me was expected. Golden State beating Cleveland 3-1. We also had the NHL Finals, which was one of the original 6 Pittsburgh Penguins going up against Nashville Predators, who I read something.
It's one of the newest teams, right? Or
I read something. Might have been a week ago. They were close to actually being financially bankrupt.
Wow.
Like 2 years ago or something like that.
Huh.
But you know, especially those first few games, I think Nashville outplayed Pittsburgh. But when you have Sidney Crosby, who is one of the greatest of this generation, it's hard to, especially NHL. There's a lot more parity in the NHL than there is in the NBA. In the NFL as well. Not so much in baseball, Major League Baseball. There's about the same amount of parity in baseball as there is in hockey, but the Penguins won the Stanley Cup and second year in a row. And let's see, we've had the NBA draft.
Draft has happened,
which that blew me away. Which doesn't surprise me with Boston having the top overall pick. They traded with the Philadelphia 76ers. They dropped down from first to third. Philadelphia moved up third to first. They gave up, I think, 2 other future draft picks, to jump up and get that number 1 pick. Markelle Fultz, guard out of University of Washington, went number 1 overall, which there was a lot of varying opinions. Extremely athletic, but University of Washington only won 9 games last year.
Right.
And he can put up numbers, but how's he gonna do in the NBA? Jason Tatum, who went third overall to Boston, has been, from what I've heard, lighting it up. Lonzo Ball, who went second overall to the Los Angeles Lakers, which Lonzo is a good player, has a weird shot.
How so?
It's almost like he's controlling the ball with his right hand. He shoots. From the little bit I've seen, he will come up and shoot, moving his right hand to the left side of his face.
Huh. Okay.
And shoot that away. A lot of people have compared him to a young Jason Kidd, which the guy's passing is just out of this world. But then, and everybody knows who LeVar, his dad, because he cannot keep his mouth shut. Now, I did read something on ESPN over the last few days that said LeVar sat down with Magic Johnson, who's the president of team operations for the Los Angeles Lakers, and said it was all marketing, quote unquote marketing ploy. Which to me, I think, with the whole big baller brand and coming out with his own shoe, to me it was kind of bad marketing, because had Lonzo signed with any of the shoe companies, Under Armour, Nike, Reebok, he would have been already making millions. With having the big baller brand, he's banking on himself. $500 price point for a pair of shoes. I'm sorry.
I mean, unless you are a bigger name brand that has the clout of years and years, and many different spokespeople, players, big name players, willing to work with you. Yeah, that's an interesting move for sure. But we'll see how it goes for him.
Then we also have NFL. We had. Did we do the? I think the draft had already happened before when we recorded last time.
And the last one, it would feel like it was cold outside, so I don't remember. It's been a while. However, the draft has happened, and what are your feelings about your team, the Houston Texans, and how they did in the draft this time around?
To be honest with you, I was kind of. I said from the end of last season that they should draft Deshaun Watson.
Okay.
He doesn't have the arm strength of a typical NFL quarterback, but if his accuracy gets better, I think he will be great for at least 10 years. I think all the analysts are kind of pushing him to be day one starter. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it will be Tom Savage, who was the first quarterback, and if I'm not mistaken, the only quarterback that Bill O'Brien, the head coach of Houston, has drafted in the 4th round out of University of Pittsburgh 4 years ago.
Okay.
He knows the playbook. The downside is he's had a few freak injuries. In week 4 of the preseason 2 years ago, tore his shoulder.
Right.
Defensive lineman landed on him. Last year, I believe it was an Achilles injury that sidelined him. So, I honestly, there's nowhere to go but up with the way Brock Osweiler played last year.
Right.
And I was one of those Osweiler believers at the beginning of the year. And at the beginning of the year, they played pretty well. But then, Brock Osweiler became Brock Osweiler. And now he's in Cleveland. And if he does great, I'm happy for him. But all the reports that I was hearing about disagreements between him and Bill O'Brien, and O'Brien's playbook is extremely complex. O'Brien came from that New England Patriots coaching tree, and it was highly complex, and it takes a while to understand that playbook.
Sure. So it almost sounds like Advantage Savage.
Yes. I think, now it would not surprise me to see Watson be the starting quarterback at some point this year.
Sure. Preseason will be pretty interesting. We'll see.
Absolutely.
And how quickly it'll be before he at least has a better working knowledge of the playbook that he can function out there. Maybe not making big plays, but at the very least being able to, consistently hit his receivers, make good decisions on the field when it comes to that. So it's it adds another level of complexity.
Hell, if he can throw outside the numbers, then we have a solid quarterback, both Savage and Watson. If they can throw outside the numbers, Osweiler could not, as strong arm as Osweiler was, could not hit the broadside of a barn thrown outside the numbers.
I think we found your what grinds your gears here. But that's an interesting thing to talk about. When you think about great quarterbacks and taking, teams to the Super Bowl, having a real big superstar, you never think about the backups in those situations unless the backup comes in because the starter gets hurt and they just have a phenomenal time, which doesn't happen all that often. Sometimes it does, but it's pretty rare.
2 times in the last 20 years that I can remember that a backup has come in and has taken over. That would be, I can't remember the year, I want to say it was 2001, New England Patriots. Drew Bledsoe got knocked out of a game. Tom Brady, the GOAT, came in, and I know you're a Dolphins fan, so this is going to be a little touchy subject for you. But when Tom Brady came in, granted that was a run first and defensive oriented team. When they
completely
first,
different than what they have now.
Exactly. Everything
4 years or so.
Everything runs through Tom now.
Yeah.
And what some people consider the evil overlord of Bill Belichick.
When the hood's up, though, Emperor Palpatine. Come on.
That is just, I can never.
And I don't say that out of hate for the Patriots. Look, I don't like the Patriots because they beat my Dolphins, but in that division, there's the Bills and the Jets and the Dolphins, and the Patriots just run all over all of them all the time. But I can appreciate Tom Brady, what he's able to do, and what Belichick's able to do as well.
The best strategic coach, in my opinion, Bill Belichick.
I can't argue that.
His halftime adjustments, the way, and it's almost one of those things where they're throwing quick passes. They're not necessarily throwing. They will throw a couple deep bombs every now and then to Gronk or Chris Hogan.
Sure.
But they are, get it out quick, throw the ball,
get your yardage, get down the field.
Exactly.
And those quick passes, when you've got the accuracy, when you've got the receivers and tight ends that can, get what you need, get down or get out of bounds, makes a world of difference. And yeah, like you said, occasionally the big plays happen, but not as often like you would expect if you weren't really if you didn't know football very well, you didn't really watch the Patriots, but you knew of how successful they have been. You would think that they would throw, longer balls, to get those really impressive plays out there. But no, it's, I mean, time and time again, it's winning, winning against your opposition, against the guy on you, and catching the ball when you need to, and getting the first downs and moving the chains.
They know exactly how to take an opponent's weakness and exploit that.
Like no other.
The only teams that really know how to hurt the Patriots play physical, man-to-man defense, get after Tom Brady.
Yeah.
You saw what Denver has done recently with the once-in-a-generation defense that they had a couple years ago when they made that Super Bowl run.
Sure.
Baltimore has been able to do as well. What Houston was able to do in that divisional game last year, if we had an NFL average quarterback, we would have won that game. Hands down, we would have won that game had it not been for Osweiler at quarterback.
Right.
But get after get after Tom Brady, make him get off his mark, and
which is no small feat because of the offensive line that they have. I mean, they protect him very well. You have to be performing at the top of your game in order to just get to Tom Brady.
And I'm sorry, they've completely loaded up with what New England has been doing. They traded their first round pick for Brandon Cooks. They are loading up for another Super Bowl run.
Sure.
In my opinion, if anybody thinks that New England will not at least be in the Super Bowl from the AFC, they are on some hallucinogenic drugs.
Fair enough.
I just think that Houston's looking long term. They're not looking for immediate success.
Not
Now,
quite in
granted,
rebuilding mode. I wouldn't call them rebuilding
not rebuilding, more like not even reloading, but they did mortgage a few draft picks to Cleveland to jump up to that 12th spot to draft Deshaun Watson.
Right.
Now, granted, Kansas City did the same thing, drafting Patrick Mahomes.
Mm-hmm.
I think if it were between the two, I still think Houston at 24, I think is where they were 24, 25th. If both of those quarterbacks were to fall to them at that point, I still think they would have drafted Watson instead of Mahomes. He's going to have to fully sit for a year, if not longer.
Okay.
I think he wound up in the perfect situation with Andy Reid.
All right.
Andy Reid's one of those guys that could take a quarterback and develop him into a top-level quarterback.
Okay.
You saw it with Brett Favre. You saw, even though Holmgren had a lot to do with Brett Favre as well, but Andy Reid was in that coaching tree in Green Bay. You saw it with Donovan McNabb.
True.
He's even actually had Alex Smith have decent success in Kansas City.
Right. I mean, they were a pretty big contender heading into the playoffs last year.
They hold Pittsburgh to 18 points, and they lost.
Yeah.
So they can only go up to a certain limit. But that's where Mahomes will, with time and development, will get them. I honestly believe the three teams that will be in the running for the Super Bowl 5 years from now will be the Oakland Raiders, who gave just a monster contract to Derek Carr, 5 years, $125 million extension, making him the highest paid player in the NFL.
Well, it wasn't a bad performance by them last year. I mean, they didn't make it all the way, but I mean,
and it was injuries that derailed them.
Sure.
I mean, I think they would have wound up being the number one seed in the AFC had it not been for injuries. Kansas City, if the development of Patrick Mahomes actually progresses the way they want, and Houston,
right?
Because Tom Brady, this may be his last year.
Could be.
Ben Roethlisberger has already been talking about retirement this entire offseason.
Sure.
So I think this will be his last year. You have
And for one, he's already been to the Super Bowl
twice.
So
3 times actually, 1, 2. The
Right.
only one he lost was against Aaron Rodgers in
Right.
Green Bay. I remember because Ziggy Hood from Amarillo played at Paladuro High School, was on that Pittsburgh Steeler team.
Right.
And as an old Houston Oilers fan, I was partially ashamed to be rooting for Pittsburgh, but
sure.
yeah, I think those are the 3 teams, And then going back to one of my original points, the other team that saw a quarterback go down with injury but had success with a backup, Dallas. The Dallas Cowboys last year.
Yeah.
I'm a little nervous about Dallas because you've got defensive coordinators have a year of tape to look at, especially the 2 New York Giant games.
Right.
But they have 2 years. They've got a full year of tape to adjust for Dak Prescott and adjust for Ezekiel Elliott.
Sure.
Which, by the way, Ezekiel Elliott is still under investigation by the NFL over the the accused domestic violence that happened coming in to the NFL draft last year. But they're having to change up their offensive line a little bit. Ronald Leary moved to Denver. They released Leary, or didn't re-sign him because he was a free agent.
Right.
He got picked up in Denver. Doug Free, who was their right tackle, he retired. Now they're looking at moving Lyle Collins, who was their undrafted rookie free agent from last year, could have gone top 15 in the draft, but was under investigation, not directly for a murder, but he was around that situation,
Sure.
and that completely derailed his draft chances.
Right.
So they got a friggin' gold mine with him.
Sure.
It'll also depend on that defense. They lost Brandon Carr. They lost Morris Claiborne. They lost Barry Church. J.J. Wilcox, I believe, is no longer there either. So that defensive secondary is going to be brand new. They drafted Chidobe Awuzie in the 2nd round out of Colorado, who I believe is a fantastic slot corner. Let's see, I want to say Jordan Lewis in the 3rd round out of Michigan. He's got the size to be an outside corner, but he's kind of a developmental guy.
Okay.
Randy Gregory, their defensive lineman, suspended for a full year. David Irving, their a bright star at the end of last year on the defensive line, suspended 4 games. It's going to be troublesome for them to actually stop somebody. They're going to have to string 8 to 10 minute drives on the offense and score a touchdown. They're going to have to win by getting 28 points. They're going to have to keep they're going to have to keep the opposing offenses on the sideline.
Sure.
So it's definitely going to be interesting. Switching from real NFL football to fantasy football, I am so stoked for the season. I'm in 2 leagues solidified right now, probably going to be in another 2. Right. The one that we have through the cigar shop here, and another one which is a dynasty draft.
Right.
Which, by the way, that draft is coming up this weekend. And the difference between what we do, which is considered a redraft league, to a dynasty league. A redraft league, every team is back in the pool once the season's over with.
Right.
Dynasty is I'm practically a general manager, and the players that I draft, I pretty much get to keep the entire time of their career.
It's pretty interesting. Have you played in Dynasty Leagues before? I have not. So this will be new for me.
I've not. This is going to be a completely new endeavor for me because I am. Whoo-wee, I'm excited. I'm nervous.
Well, and it's going to be. I mean, obviously, trades are going to be your friend in that situation, because if you're not happy with who you get, and again, since this will be the first time we're doing this, or the first year of this Dynasty League, the next year will be more interesting. Because if you pick up now,
yeah.
you're going to keep everybody, and so at that point, it's like, okay, well, and personally, I'm not very good at trades. A lot of times I get swindled on trades, and so I actually don't accept a whole lot of trades, because I'm like, well, I'm going to keep faith in who I've got for the most part.
The one that I can remember is, and everybody thinks that I pretty much just bent you over the table over it, was I drafted Adrian Peterson 3rd overall last year, and then later on I drafted his backup, Jerick McKinnon.
Right.
You drafted Lamar Miller. Was it you drafted him in the 2nd round?
I don't remember when it was, but yeah, I had.
But
Miller.
I traded both Peterson and McKinnon for Lamar Miller and Russell Shepard, the wide receiver out of New York, and I came ahead, even though Lamar Miller basically kind of had a down year last year.
True.
But yeah, I kind of.
Yeah, I didn't. I lost faith in Lamar Miller. And I picked him up because he was a fantastic player. But number two,
that was right after the draft.
Yeah.
That I traded you, and like
I was not thinking. I wasn't thinking that he would be able to produce very well, from that point on, given his performance with the Dolphins, and really it turned out that his switch to the Texans was a fantastic move for him.
Well, and he was as a guy that was only getting like 60% of the touches in the Miami Dolphins backfield, was still a top 10, top 12 running back for 2 straight years.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
it was.
So that was definitely short-sightedness on my part, but yes, it's going to be an interesting fantasy football season. I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the Dynasty League as well.
I still think that a lot of people nowadays, going back to real NFL, there's some people. Adam Schefter even said last week that he would be nervous to draft Ezekiel Elliott in a fantasy football draft because of that domestic violence.
That's a big question. And it could go really bad for you. And then it's like at that point, well, who would want to trade? It's kind of like the Adrian Peterson situation in that and I was thinking in that situation, well, okay, all of his legal stuff is pretty much over. Mm-hmm. And then that didn't work out well for me. So
because minimum for the NFL for any sort of domestic violence, even though the case has been, there was no legal issues,
right.
But with the NFL, they hold their players a little bit to a higher standard, which kind of bugs me a little bit. It's just like, this has been going on for a year now. Nothing has come out. I mean, and maybe it's because of what happened with the Ray Rice incident. He was suspended for two games. Just before week 3, the video came out, and then the NFL was just like, oh, crap.
Right.
And they suspended him for the entire year.
Sure.
The Greg Hardy incident,
right.
Which legally there was no, the victim refused to testify, but with everything that came out over him, like tossing his girlfriend on the couch and whatnot, they suspended him for 10 games. He appealed. I think he got it reduced to 6.
Right.
And maybe it's the NFL finally figuring out, Roger Goodell and NFL authorities, you might say, finally figuring something out.
Right.
They're not going to suspend until they conduct a full investigation, which could be 6 weeks, which is going to be almost half of the fantasy football season.
Right.
If I'm sitting there like at 3rd in our point per reception redraft league,
mm-hmm.
I might go Antonio Brown instead of Ezekiel Elliott. I might let somebody else
deal with
that headache.
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting.
Yeah, very true.
How's the cigar?
I have enjoyed it. When I typically prefer darker wrappers, Maduros. And but this one's been good. It's not as heavy as some of the others that I do prefer, but I have enjoyed it. Great flavors. It smokes very well. It's wrapped really well. Again, confirming your assessment that it's a fantastic day-to-day cigar.
Oh, yeah.
Temperature rising to my heart, to the root and to the bone.
What games you been playing recently?
Well, I'll be honest. So you let me borrow Dead Rising 3 a while back, and only a couple months ago did I actually start playing it in earnest, and gotten fairly far in that. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. Definitely easier than the previous iterations, I think.
Really?
Well, I find it easier in that, obviously, compared to the first one, you couldn't run. In the first one, the AI of your survivors,
sprint.
You couldn't sprint. Yeah,
yeah.
The AI of your survivors was just awful. And
God,
and
yes,
3,
absolutely.
1 and 2 were really heavy on getting your survivors and getting them safe. Now, 3 is more of there's some survivors, but the fact that you can have a posse and you can load them up with weapons just about any time, and the fact that you clear a certain zone and you can have multiple bases around. I forget the name of the city you're in, but then you can go and just grab whatever weapon. But you can go and grab whatever weapon that you have previously gotten and whatever weapon combo that you made. That by far is head and shoulders advanced even over number 2.
Which by the way, Dead Rising 2 introduced where you could create combo weapons, but you had to go to a certain spot, which were located across the map.
I mean, there were plenty of them, but if you were trying to navigate, okay, I've got to get this survivor over here, just to get them back over there, and then okay, I've got to grab the materials to make this weapon that I want. What was a very interesting part of the gameplay, and now it's like you can make something wherever you're at.
Exactly.
So that right there is easier, but then also you can give the survivors, like you can have a machine gun like on day 1, and you can give your survivors machine guns. Like I saw a video, I haven't done this myself because I haven't had all that many survivors at once, but you load up, you get your posse up to like 6 or 7, and you load them all up with machine guns, and then you go take on that next boss, and you just sit back and just watch the life drain. It's really cool.
And like the first Dead Rising, the main thing was you were a photojournalist. You were a freelance photojournalist, Frank West. And you were basically trying to, get survivors, but then kind of figure out what was going on. In Dead Rising 2, you were a former motocross champion, Chuck Green.
You were trying to clear your name, and that was the incentive to figure out the story, figure out what was going on.
With having a young daughter who had been bitten, and, every now and then you had to go find what they called Zombrex,
right,
which was an antidote that
a temporary antidote. It held off the zombification.
Then you had in Dead Rising 3, you're this young mechanic which makes sense with the whole creating combo weapons on the fly.
Right.
You're a mechanic, so of course you're going to be able to create that stuff on the fly. How far have you gotten into it?
I don't remember what day I'm on.
Because I don't want to fully spoil the story.
Of course not. I'm more than halfway, and I will be honest. At one point, about a month and a half ago, I found a pretty good deal on on the original Dead Rising on Xbox One, and so that kind of led me down. All right, I'm feeling a little nostalgic, so I started playing that, and just about 2 weeks ago, I beat that, and then I started. With the fun stuff like trying to kill as many zombies as you can to get the Mega Booster.
Which, by the way, we're both play Xbox One. Neither one of us own a PS4, even though my best times were playing the PlayStation 2 and the PlayStation 3. But the main reason why I became an Xbox guy was for the Dead Rising series.
Sure, because and Dead Rising 3 was the first one that was Xbox exclusive.
No. The original Dead Rising was an Xbox exclusive.
Oh, and then later the original Dead Rising was on PS3.
Number 2, Dead Rising 2 was a cross-platform game. And then number 3 and number 4 are I believe Dead Rising 4, which I'm
playing now.
playing. I believe that's an Xbox exclusive. But not only that, I felt really nostalgic. I bought a PS2.
Right.
And I've been playing Saturday Night Speedway, which is a dirt track racing game.
Right.
I have been wanting a dirt track racing game for the Xbox 360, the PS3, and the new gen systems ever since they came out.
Sure.
Because I'm a big fan of it. There's a studio based out of Australia called Big Ant Studios. I read this a few months ago. They were wanting to create a next gen dirt track racing series.
Okay.
They couldn't get the funding at the time. They created a Kickstarter. They couldn't get the funding.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they're now looking at trying to find other means of income to create it. They're still looking to create it, but they're trying to find other means.
Sure.
So yeah, my wife and I, the original Guitar Hero. We're looking for Guitar Hero 2.
Sure.
We both want to try the new Rock Band. I think it's Rock Band 4.
I think so.
And you and I were really big into playing Rock Band. You, the guitarist, me, the drummer.
Yeah.
I love banging stuff. What can I say?
And it's been now probably maybe 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5 years since we played together on any of those particular games. So
and I've been I play NBA 2K17 every now and then.
Sure.
I have I finished Far Cry 4
okay.
story campaign.
Right.
Which is in my opinion, if you're looking for a single player campaign game, the Far Cry series for you.
Right.
I mean, you can do co-op, but man, I don't really play online.
Yeah, I don't either.
That much, and so, I've got Madden 18 on pre-order. I'm gonna play that when it comes out. Luckily, I'm off work on Wednesdays, and the game comes out Tuesday night, so I'll probably be up a lot that Tuesday night playing it. So, but yeah, or is it August, or did they come out on Fridays now? I can't remember. Anyway.
Well, and it's funny that you bring up multiplayer playing. I don't know if we mentioned this last time, but I tell you what, for me, multiplayer, I never have been that big into it. And the first Call of Duty Modern Warfare I had, and I played a bit online, and it just became obvious to me that I'm never going to be at the level of most of the kids that play because I don't play enough and I don't care enough to play enough to try and get good. And so I stopped playing online, and this has been years ago. So I really don't get much into that. And like with the Star Wars Battlefront that came out, I guess it's been 2 years now. I got that. That's when I got the Xbox One.
I got that at launch as well.
And I found the multiplayer so much like Call of Duty, and the level of players I was playing with, it's like,
and it was basically I compared that to because it's made by Electronic Arts. I considered it Call of Duty Star Wars.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did too.
The story mode and
there wasn't a story mode.
An E3 happened about a few weeks ago,
right.
And just watching some of the videos that I have of Star Wars. They're putting some really good emphasis on a storyline.
Right, which was one of the big complaints. I know it was one of my complaints about Star Wars Battlefront was that there really wasn't a single-player mode. Yeah, you could go through the trainings, but there wasn't a story mode. And there was such an opportunity to have a very rich story mode. And considering the previous iteration of Star Wars Battlefront, which was number 2, which was on PS2 and Xbox as well. That story mode, the 501st Battalion of were clone troopers, and they did the storyline basically from Attack of the Clones into Revenge of the Sith. That story mode was fantastic. I mean, it was amazing.
Even the first Battlefront, if I'm not mistaken, had a pretty decent.
It had a story mode, but compared to what they came out with in 2, it really didn't hold up. It was there, and it felt a little like, okay, we got to throw this in here, but in all honesty, the 1 and 2 blew it out of the water, and that's really why I played 2. Because when I had a PS2 back then, I didn't play online. That was available to do so. You could play online.
That had to have been horrible. Playing the PlayStation 2 games online, that had to have been. I never did.
I never did either.
But that had to have been absolutely horrible.
I can't imagine how it would have been.
So I'm really interested, and even some of the multiplayer stuff, like you can play as battle droids.
Right.
Now, I mean, there's a lot more that they have going on, at least from everything that I watched.
Sure.
Now, I did watch Microsoft's and Electronic Arts. I watched their presentations.
Yeah.
What do you think about the Project Scorpio that they had, the Xbox One X?
Well, I didn't get much into it because, for me, honestly, I'm probably not going to get it because I've got my Xbox, and that's they're going to be continuing to produce games for that for years to come. We're not going to get to next generation. These are kind of like half generation steps up that both Microsoft and Sony are doing, and some of the things that I've heard about. It's just not something I'm interested in.
Well, and basically what they're doing, because I watched it and I listened to the Major Nelson podcast,
right.
the main Xbox podcast.
Yeah, he's kind of the spokesman for Xbox when it.
The guy's very interesting. You can play games in 4K resolution. Problem is, if you don't have a 4K TV, which I'm not going to shell out $1,000 on a 4K TV. I'm not going to shell out $500 on a Xbox One X. I think it might have, like, the loading times are way, way shorter. But for me, I'm the same way. I'm like, the only one I'd jump up to is I may get the Xbox One S,
right?
Which I think now is like $200.
Yeah,
but even then, there's not much difference between
what you got now
and the One S. And I can get an external hard drive and put games on there, connect that to my Xbox One, and be fine with it.
Right. And I tell you what, the upgrade in graphics and going to the 4K, that's cool. And I know there's a ton of gamers out there that they're going to spend the money day one. Those systems come out, just, for that reason. It's really not my thing. And to be honest, it's whatever next generation TV comes out, whatever next resolution they have, that'll be out a while before I even consider going to 4K myself.
Hypothetical question. I personally don't see a new game system coming out within 5 years. Like,
that's an interesting
I don't.
point.
What do you think? Because I don't see TVs with what they're at right now. I don't see the technology enhancing anymore in the next 5 years. I think technology wise, as far as TV and games, we've hit a plateau. Do you think outside of these half steps with PlayStation doing the PlayStation 4 and then the PlayStation 4 Pro,
right,
and everything that I keep hearing with the third-party gaming podcasts that I listen to, they're saying that the PlayStation 4 Pro is head and shoulders better than the Xbox One X. Maybe the Xbox One X has kind of come up to the level.
Okay.
I don't see technology increasing anymore for quite some time. Like, I'd say at least 5 years.
Well, and when you consider how good graphics are currently, and by currently I mean with Xbox One, PlayStation 4, obviously a little bit better with the next step, the half steps up that they're taking, but being all that much better, I mean, it's not like the shift from, say, Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 2 and the Xbox up to those next generations, at 360, PlayStation 3, and even the Nintendo stepped up. They had a GameCube and then the Wii. We're not at a point where we're going to see that big of a jump in graphics, processing power, all that kind of stuff. So I agree with you in that it's going to be a while before we have that next step. Before even that next step up will be unveiled. I think.
And I see. if you're wondering why we don't really talk about Nintendo that much, I lost interest in Nintendo when they launched the GameCube.
Okay.
Because at the time, I was so far deep into playing the original PlayStation and PlayStation 2, I had no interest in playing the Nintendo.
Sure.
Not only that, now when the Wii came out, I was interested because it's like, okay, you can actually do a little bit more, hands-free stuff,
Yeah.
and all like that. Our family got a Wii, and we were playing it. You know, we thought it was going to make us a little bit more active, and then that one night, out at our family's house, our uncle sitting there in a chair playing golf. He's beating the heck out of both of us, and we're standing up, and we're going through the actual motion and whatnot. Well, so for me, it was just like that. I was somewhat interested in the Wii, like the Wii U, and the Nintendo Switch that came out recently. I just, to me, I still consider Nintendo to be a kids game system, not necessarily for
What
guys
hardcore
guys
gamers.
our age. Which, by the way, I mean, our really good friend Tony, he has a Nintendo Switch, loves it, but he is really big into the Zelda games.
Right.
Really big into that type of, like, almost Japanese-esque RPGs, which I'm not.
Right.
You know.
Well, and I like those games, and of course through Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, I was along the, I was much of a Nintendo fan, and then got away from that when I was in college. But really, Nintendo, they have their core base, who they want their Mario game, they want their Zelda game. And by all means, they better get their damn games.
Yeah.
And the last one I played a little bit of it, a couple hours worth, at a friend's house who's got the Switch, and it is a fantastic game. I mean, it is gorgeous. It works well, and the Switch, of course, the portability of it, not something that they tacked on. They really put a lot of effort into that.
I think that's gonna be one of those things that screen's gonna get scratched up quite a bit. And I have a year and a half old son at home, and if I get something like that, I can almost guarantee it's going to be torn up within 3 months.
Right.
Right. So, that's why for me, I've been thinking about doing a PlayStation 4 just to kind of see what the difference is.
Sure.
See what the difference is. But most of the games that I'm going to play on the PS4, I can get for the Xbox One.
Very true.
What'd you think about in the Xbox presentation, what did you think about the original Xbox backwards compatibility?
Well, it's an interesting thing after the previous mentality and policy of, well, we're not going to do this because we're going to put more of our effort towards new games. But it's something so many people cried about and complained about when they took on that policy. But
you and I never owned an original Xbox.
No.
Both of us were PS2 up until the 360 came out.
Right.
And then that's when you and I moved over to Microsoft and started playing the 360. Right. And I was honestly back and forth between the 360 and PS3 for a while. I did have the red ring, the red circle of doom on my Xbox 360. I sent it away. That was probably the most boring 3 weeks of my entire life.
Sure.
But yeah, I just I tried to get an original Xbox recently, and you know what? I'm just kind of like,
well, if they're going to be going in that direction of having being able to play original Xbox on your latest one, then that really kind of makes it moot. I'm glad that they're doing that because, personally, I don't buy games right off the bat unless it's like the last one I did in that situation was Star Wars Battlefront. And I did that as I got my incentive there was to get the Xbox One. And then, here's this, new game as well. So I tend to get used games quite a bit. So for me, that's a cool thing. But again, there weren't a whole lot of original Xbox One games that I would want to play. So that really wasn't.
Right.
I don't think I was much in the market for that.
I wasn't that crazy about the backwards compatibility at first because I looked at all their games. I'm like, you're coming out with X amount every single month, and it's just kind of third, 1 awesome game, 9 horrible games.
Right, yeah.
And so do you have Steam?
I do have Steam.
Okay, what is Steam? Because I don't have it, and I keep hearing that Steam is like head and shoulders better than the Microsoft backwards compatibility.
Well, Steam, really is going to depend on your PC situation, and honestly, for me, I use Steam. I picked up like 2 or 3 games on it. The main one that I picked up was Star Wars Battlefront 2. To be totally honest, that's the whole reason I got Steam.
Nice.
Because at one point in time, I found online for probably more than they were worth at the time, but I picked them up anyway. Star Wars Battlefront and Battlefront 2 for the Xbox because I could play them on the 360. And then when I realized I could play them on Steam, I'm like, well, crap. And I could modify them too. So that's one advantage that you have going with Steam is that you can modify games. Like you've seen videos of Grand Theft Auto 4 and 5. The mods that you can have, like there's an Incredible Hulk mod. You can there's a mod for you can fly around the Millennium Falcon. There's an Iron Man mod. You can't do that with the console versions,
right?
Which would be really awesome, but we're not there yet. So for me, Steam was really based on Star Wars Battlefront 2, and the mods that I could use with that, which were awesome. Like for instance, one of the mods was a Force Awakening mod where you could play as Kylo Ren, you could play as Rey, Finn as well. So it's one of those things. It for me, it was a little bit more of a specified need that I had there that I got it. But a lot of great games on Steam. They have a huge sale every year, once a year on games for really cheap. So you can pick up a whole bunch of those. But again, it depends on your PC situation.
I think also, correct me if I'm wrong, but Sony has something along that lines where you can. Some sort of, I know Xbox recently came out with an Xbox Game Pass where I think for like $15 a month they have a long list of games you can go back, download, and play.
Yeah.
Now I haven't looked at that list yet. I want to look at that list before I invest in that $15 a month.
Oh, sure.
I think Sony's got something similar to that on the PlayStation Network.
Yeah, it's you have to be signed up for PlayStation Plus, which is a subscription-based membership.
A lot like Xbox Live Gold.
Yeah, but that kind of makes sense. So they can make money. They can make money off of the older games, and you know what? I'm not going to harbor any hateful feelings towards them for that. That makes sense. And if you want the convenience of, I can play this classic game, or this game I used to play on a different system on my current system without having to have 15 different boxes near your TV, that makes sense. That's kind of a handy thing. So you may actually be interested in that.
Complete side note, you have not once touched up your cigar. This is the third time I'm having to touch up.
I haven't, and I'm quite impressed with myself actually, because now I've had the uneven burn from time to time, but I've worked with it. But
I think a lot of it comes down to I talk a little bit more.
A little bit more
than you do. I mean, some of my nicknames out there are Motormouth Matt. So
that is having a lot to do with it. But we're actually kind of even. If I looking right now, we're pretty even on how much we smoke.
Plants are withered, desert streams bring people misery. All the water's gone, all the trees are dry. There's no more water, there's no tears to cry.
So as we're wrapping up this podcast, and we tried to keep it to a certain time limit, but these conversations that you and I have, I mean, we've done stuff like this for years,
and only now we're recording them.
Yeah, and
occasionally.
We would sit at coffee shops. We'd sit at Starbucks before people started getting kind of pissy about the cigar smoke. We would sit, there's Palace Coffee in town. We would sit outside, smoke cigars, drink coffee. We would sit at home and do this. We'd sit at cigar shops and do this, especially here at Jones Cowan Pipe and Tobacco Shop.
Yep.
And so these conversations run. We don't ever keep to a time limit. But the last thing that we want to the last segment, you might say, that we have is bringing back an old Family Guy reference.
Right.
Chris, what grinds your gears? What has been grinding your gears recently?
Well, let's see here. So,
And it could be any topic.
yeah,
Any
yeah.
topic we've talked about, any topic whatsoever. Nothing is off limits here.
Well, this may be reoccurring, what grinds your gears for me, but I tell you what, certain, traffic in Amarillo, there's not a lot to say about that. Positive, but one thing that really, that really just infuriates me when I'm out on the road is, someone who's in one lane, the far left or the far right lane, and then proceeds to get right in front of you and then move over into the opposite lane just so they can, make that turn on whatever street, as opposed to the way I generally try to do this is, I've got to get over in this lane. Well, there's a bunch of traffic behind me and there's a bunch of traffic in front of me, so I'll just turn the opposite way down a street and go around and stop at the stop sign and then get across that way. But people that, oh my gosh, people that will cross over very quickly in front of everybody else, not caring who they piss off, that grinds my gears quite a bit. And I would really love to not see that, but that's just, you're going to get that anywhere. But specifically, man, oh man, I have to
And we've been
count to
having
10
a lot,
many times.
And we've been having a lot of construction. Okay, so we're going back to football.
Okay.
Specifically fantasy football. And this is one of the things that I listen to several fantasy football podcasts and football podcasts in general. One of them, the one that I absolutely love the most, the Fantasy Footballers.
Okay.
You can find them on Twitter at the Fantasy Footballers. I love those guys.
Okay.
But the one thing that grinds my gears, and this has a lot to do with the CBS Fantasy Today, which I love those guys as well, but they put a lot of emphasis on the yards, specifically running backs.
Mm-hmm.
They put a lot of emphasis on yards per carry.
Okay.
The average in the NFL is 4.2 yards per carry.
Right.
Anything under that, they're like, oh, well, he had a low yards per carry, blah, blah, blah. He's not good. Melvin Gordon, for instance, the first year he was in his rookie year, he had like a 3.0, 3.5 yards per carry, somewhere around there.
Right.
Everybody was just, oh, the guy's not great. Somebody like Lamar Miller when he was in Miami was doing 5+ yards per carry. Oh, he's fantastic. Why are they not giving him the ball more? All like that. Well, Lamar Miller goes to Houston, gets, I think, 75% of the workload in Houston.
Right.
His yards per carry dips down below that 4.2 average.
Right.
Oh, he's not that great. He can't seem to run the ball well. And even Melvin Gordon still, the reason why his production went up, he had 0 touchdowns his rookie year, had 12 last year. And everybody's like, oh, well, he still has a horrible yards per carry. And for colleges, is the same way.
Right.
To be good, for scouts to be good, project a player to be good from college to the NFL, you have to have at least a 5.0 yards per carry.
Right.
And if you're lower than that, oh, he's not great. You have to look at it from, okay, is he getting a bulk of the workload to, if he's only getting like 30 to 40%,
Right.
and he's having a high yards per carry, okay, you put somebody that has 60 to 75% yard workload and has a low yards per carry,
Right.
it's going to happen. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, he's not great. That just bothers the hell out of me.
Okay.
That grinds my gears. Because, of course, like if somebody's at the 1 yard line or 2 yard line, runs it in for a touchdown, that's gonna lower his yards per carry.
Right. But
You
you're
know?
helping out the team overall if you can punch it in at the goal line, because you see so many teams that get down to the red zone and they just can't make it happen. Kick a field goal, and let's hope we do it better on the next round. So yeah, I can totally.
Oh
understand
my
that.
God, that frustrates the hell out of me.
Gotcha.
Because I tend to, as far as fantasy football goes, I tend to look at. I'm not one of those guys that just goes off of stats. I look at Christopher Harris, Harris Football Podcast. Go listen to him. I love the dude. He formerly worked at ESPN, now was on his own. His podcast, he always calls it the little podcast that could. Does immense work with game film. And that's where he does a little bit with stats, but primarily is game film.
Okay.
Whereas a lot of CBS, Yahoo, even the NFL Fantasy Live podcast, and I love those guys as well. Those guys, hilarious, great chemistry. They tend to work off of just stat sheets alone, and don't really, from listening to them, seems like they don't really do a whole lot as far as game film. Mm-hmm. The Fantasy Footballers podcast, in my opinion, has that perfect combination of stats and game film.
Right.
Chris Harris is more of game film, less about the stats. And it really bothers me, yards per catch with wide receivers, yards per carry with running backs, yards per pass attempt with quarterbacks. It's I know there's some truth to it, but every time he's got X amount of yards per carry, yards per attempt, I'm like, just stop.
Right.
Just stop.
Start looking at the bigger picture.
Start looking at the bigger picture. Absolutely. So how's the end of the year? Since we're wrapping up the podcast, how's the end of your cigar?
The last 2 inches down to, and again, I haven't had anything to complain about this cigar at all, which I generally don't. If I pick out a cigar, it's a rare occasion I have anything to complain about. The flavor's smooth. It's dark enough for me. The flavor's really coming in nicely, and again, very well wrapped. I haven't really had much issue with uneven burning at all. Mm. And again, I haven't. You're the one that's had to light it back up a couple times.
A fourth time, yeah. I had to relight a fourth time.
And I'm on the nub, and I still got some smoke I could get out of it.
And see, I don't have a problem relighting.
Oh,
I really don't. Of course, I smoke at work. I smoke New Cuba cigars, which are a bundle kind of second run cigar, a little lower quality tobacco. Still great.
Yeah, good, yeah.
But I smoke those at work. I can get a bundle for $80,
right?
Which is fantastic. Whereas most boxed cigars run 125 to and up. So I'm used to relighting cigars.
And again, that's no judgment on anybody that has to relight. If this were any other day where we're up here at Danny's and smoking, I usually have at least one relight, if not two. That I've been keeping. I'm impressed with myself here, but that I haven't had to relight it. But also, you've been doing most of the talking here, so I've had plenty of opportunities to take drags here.
Well, that's true. And to me, as far as podcasting and radio goes, I couldn't be just a producer just pushing buttons and keeping track of time back behind. I would wind up becoming an on-air talent.
Yeah.
Loosely talent.
Yeah.
Because I would talk.
Yeah.
I would be the one that talks.
Yeah.
But
good, fantastic selection on a cigar. I'll definitely be getting this again for sure. Don't know what we're going to get next time, as that's going to be. We're going to decide right before we record, actually.
Yeah.
Unless we have certain ideas about something that we really been wanting to try, something like that. But I love it. I wouldn't. I guess if I were to give it a rating, A through F, because I don't know the numbers so well, except if it's 90 or better, I know that's a really good cigar. I would say A minus, solid A minus. Not one of the best, not the best cigar I've had, but again, a good quality cigar nonetheless.
Mine on this one is going to be a solid A. It's not one of these that just absolutely blows my mind, where I'm like, oh my God, this is one of the best cigars I've ever smoked. Sure. But definitely, I give it a solid A. It is. I can pick this one up and light it. Like if I'm walking around the humidor and I'm like, man, I don't know what to smoke. I see that, I pick it up.
There you go. Okay, very cool.
So.
And so, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We appreciate your patronage listening in, and we'll be working on having one of these about twice a month, once every 2 weeks, and talking about sports in great detail some days, games, movies, everything you can, and of course cigars. So to all of our cigar brothers and sisters out there, light them up, enjoy, and for Matt Martin, I'm Chris Martin, and have a great day.
See ya!
Thank you.